Future faking. Future faking is one of the most deceptive and emotionally damaging forms of manipulation because it weaponizes something pure, your hope for a better life. It's not just lying about what they want with you. It's the strategic use of vivid promises, heartfelt conversations, and shared dreams to make you believe in a life that will never come to pass. The manipulator paints this life in such rich, convincing detail that you can see it, feel it, and start building your own identity around it. You start picturing the home you'll share, the vacations you'll take, the milestones you'll celebrate together. You might even start making small real-life preparations for it, saving money, changing habits, aligning your goals to match theirs. And that's exactly what they want. Because once you've invested in that future, you'll fight to protect it, even when reality is showing you something entirely different. This tactic works so effectively because it doesn't feel like manipulation. In the beginning, it feels like love. You're swept up in deep conversations that go far beyond the surface. Talks about where you'll live, the kind of lifestyle you'll have, how you'll support each other through challenges. They'll ask you about your dreams, your values, your ideal future, and then reflect them back to you as if they're exactly on the same page. This mirroring creates an intoxicating bond because it feels like you've finally found someone who gets you. It doesn't occur to you that they're not actually committing to those plans. They're simply telling you what you most want to hear. Over time, the cracks begin to show. You might notice that while they're endlessly willing to talk about the future, they rarely take real steps toward it. Whenever you try to move from words to action, there's always a delay. The excuses sound reasonable. We just need to save a little more money first. Now's not the right time because of my job. I really want this with you, but my family situation is complicated right now. You accept these explanations because you want to believe they're temporary obstacles. You don't see that those delays are part of the design. What makes future faking so devastating is that it traps you in emotional limbo. You're not unhappy enough to walk away because you keep believing things will get better, and you're not happy enough to feel secure because those promises never actually materialize. The manipulator knows this in-between state is powerful. It keeps you attached, hopeful, and unwilling to risk losing what you think is just around the corner. They don't have to constantly chase you, because you're already chasing the vision they planted in your mind. The longer this goes on, the more invested you become. You've already given them your trust, your time, and your emotional energy. You may have turned down other opportunities or relationships because you believe in the future they promised. That's when the trap deepens, because walking away doesn't just mean losing them. It means facing the pain of realizing the future you built in your head was never real. This is why many victims of future faking stay for years, even when they know deep down something isn't right. The hope has been weaponized against them. Breaking free from future faking requires a hard shift in how you measure love. You can't rely solely on words or promises, no matter how convincing they sound. You have to look for consistent action over time. Someone who truly intends to build a life with you doesn't just talk about it when it's convenient. They take concrete steps, even small ones, to make it real. And they do it without you having to beg, remind, or pressure them. When you stop giving weight to someday and start asking, "What are we doing today?" you take away the manipulator's power. You stop living in a story they've written for you and start living in the reality you can see, touch, and measure. And the moment you see that their actions don't match their words, you're free to walk away, because you'll know that the person worth your love is someone who builds with you now, not someone who keeps you waiting for a future that will never come. Ambient abuse. Ambient abuse is one of the most quietly destructive forms of psychological manipulation because it hides in plain sight. Unlike obvious verbal attacks or physical aggression, it works in the shadows. It's subtle, understated, and often invisible to anyone outside the relationship. This kind of abuse doesn't scream. It whispers. It's not the explosive arguments or cruel insults you can point to. Instead, it's the quiet sigh when you share something you're excited about, the dismissive glance when you express your needs, the silence that follows when you've done something they disapprove of. It's the slow erosion of your confidence and sense of self through countless small, almost imperceptible actions that, over time, completely reshape how you see yourself. What makes ambient abuse so powerful is its subtlety. The abuser rarely raises their voice, rarely does anything dramatic that would make people around you suspicious. To outsiders, they may even seem calm, patient, and kind. This is why victims often struggle to explain what's wrong. They don't have a clear incident to point to, just a constant, low-level feeling of unease. You begin to second-guess yourself because nothing they do seems bad enough to label as abuse. Yet, the emotional damage builds day by day, like a slow leak that eventually floods the entire house. Imagine a partner who never yells or insults you directly, but constantly communicates their disapproval through body language or tone. You tell them about a dream you have, and instead of encouragement, they give you a flat expression or a quiet, "Oh." You share good news, and they respond with a mild shrug, as if it's not impressive. You start to feel smaller without realizing why. Over time, you adjust your behavior, trying to avoid that subtle disapproval. You speak less about your dreams. You filter your words. You second-guess decisions because you're afraid of the cold, quiet reaction you've come to dread. Without meaning to, you start to shape your personality around avoiding their silent judgment. This manipulation works so well because it's invisible to others and easy for the abuser to deny. If you confront them, they can say you're imagining it, that they're not doing anything wrong. And in a way, they're telling the truth. They're not doing something, they're withholding something. Withholding affection, validation, warmth, and support is just as damaging as direct cruelty, but it leaves no obvious wounds. The absence of kindness becomes a constant background noise in your life, one you eventually normalize. The emotional toll is immense. You begin to lose trust in your own perceptions because everyone else sees them as a good person. Friends may even comment on how lucky you are to be with someone so calm and composed, making you feel guilty for sensing that something is off. That guilt keeps you silent. And silence is exactly what ambient abuse thrives on. The more you doubt yourself, the easier it is for them to maintain control without ever raising their voice. Breaking free from ambient abuse starts with awareness. You have to notice the pattern, the constant undercurrent of disapproval, the way you feel smaller and more anxious around them, the fact that you are always walking on eggshells despite the absence of overt conflict. Abuse is not defined by volume or visibility. It can be quiet. It can be hidden in sighs, pauses, and glances. And just because no one else can see it doesn't mean it's not real. Once you recognize it, you can start reclaiming your voice. This might mean setting boundaries, seeking outside validation from people who truly support you, or even stepping away entirely from the relationship. The truth is, someone who loves and values you will make you feel safe, encouraged, and seen, not small, uncertain, and constantly on edge. And when you step out of the shadow of ambient abuse, you'll realize that silence can be peaceful again, instead of a weapon used to keep you under control. Cold empathy. Empathy is often described as one of the most beautiful traits a person can have, the ability to truly understand and feel what another person is going through. It's what connects us, builds trust, and creates bonds that feel unbreakable. We usually think of empathy as warm, comforting, and genuine, but there's a darker side to it that few people recognize, a side that's just as dangerous as cruelty. This is called cold empathy. And unlike the empathy you've known, cold empathy has nothing to do with care or compassion. Instead, it's empathy stripped of warmth, used as a tool of precision, control, and manipulation. Cold empathy is when a person has the ability to read you, to understand your emotions, your needs, and your vulnerabilities, without sharing any of those feelings themselves. They're not connecting with you to comfort or support you. They're studying you. Every word you say, every reaction you give, every subtle change in your expression becomes data for them to use. It's emotional intelligence without the heart, a scalpel instead of an embrace. And because it feels like genuine understanding at first, most people don't see the trap until they're already in it. This kind of empathy can be extremely convincing. Someone with cold empathy will listen intently, nod at the right times, ask the right questions, and mirror your emotions perfectly. They might even cry when you share something painful, or smile warmly when you talk about something exciting. But it's an act, a calculated performance designed to make you trust them enough to reveal the parts of yourself you usually protect. And once they have that information, they'll store it away like ammunition, ready to use it in a way that benefits them even if it hurts you. Think of a manager who seems to always notice when you're overwhelmed. They lean in, lower their voice, and tell you they understand. They might say, "I know you've been carrying a lot lately, you're doing so well." You walk away feeling seen. But a week later, they use that knowledge to push more work onto you, knowing you won't want to disappoint them. Or think about a partner who knows exactly how insecure you feel about a certain topic. They never bring it up in the beginning, but during an argument, they drop it like a dagger, hitting you where they know you're most vulnerable. What makes cold empathy so dangerous is that it looks exactly like genuine empathy until the mask slips. You'll believe they care because they act like they care. You'll open up to them because they create the perfect emotional environment for you to do so. And the more you share, the more power you give them. Not because you've told them secrets, but because you've shown them exactly how you operate emotionally. They'll know how to soothe you when they want you close, and how to wound you when they want you weak. Victims of cold empathy often describe feeling drained without knowing why. They remember moments where the person seemed deeply caring, but those moments were always followed by subtle manipulation, requests, or emotional undermining. The warmth they thought they felt always came with strings attached, strings they didn't notice at first because they were too focused on how good it felt to be understood. Over time, this leads to confusion. You question yourself. Am I imagining the manipulation? Maybe I'm being too hard on them. After all, they've been so kind to me. That doubt is exactly what keeps you in place. Breaking free from cold empathy means learning to measure people not just by how well they understand you, but by what they do with that understanding. Genuine empathy results in actions that consistently support and protect you, even when it's inconvenient for the other person. Cold empathy, on the other hand, may feel supportive in the moment, but eventually serves the manipulator's own needs. If someone repeatedly uses your vulnerabilities against you, no matter how empathetic they appear, they are not on your side. The hardest part of spotting cold empathy is that it requires you to override the comfort it gives you. You have to be willing to step back and ask, does this person's insight into my feelings lead to my well-being? Or does it eventually lead to my harm? Once you start seeing patterns, you'll realize that true care is proven through consistency, not just the ability to mirror your emotions, but the choice to protect you with that knowledge instead of exploiting it. And when you finally recognize the cold precision behind a warm smile, you'll never confuse emotional understanding with emotional safety again. Silent conditioning. When most people think of manipulation, they imagine it being loud, obvious, and confrontational, raised voices, harsh words, or direct commands. But there's another kind of manipulation that works in almost complete silence. It doesn't demand. It doesn't shout. It doesn't need to threaten. Instead, it slowly reshapes your behavior through tiny, calculated responses. This is called silent conditioning, and it's one of the most stealthy and effective forms of control a manipulator can use. Silent conditioning works by subtly rewarding behaviors they like and quietly punishing the ones they don't, without ever having to say it out loud. There's no clear agreement, no open negotiation. You're simply guided, like a plant bending toward sunlight, except in this case, the sunlight is their approval, and it only shines when you act in a way they want. The moment you step outside of that, it disappears. The effect is so gradual that you rarely notice it's happening until you realize your personality, choices, and even beliefs have shifted to fit their unspoken rules. The reward can be as simple as a smile, a warm tone, or a sudden burst of affection. The punishment can be just as subtle. A slight change in body language, a colder voice, an absence of attention. These signals seem small on their own, but over time, they train you. You start to avoid certain topics because you've noticed they lead to withdrawal. You stop doing things you enjoy because they don't get a positive response. Without realizing it, you start filtering yourself, bending yourself, shaping yourself. Not because they told you to, but because you've learned the unspoken consequences of not complying. Imagine a relationship where you share your excitement about a new hobby, only to be met with a flat, disengaged expression. They don't argue, they don't insult you, they just don't react. Days later, you share something that aligns with their preferences, and suddenly they're attentive, warm, and full of interest. Your brain records this as a pattern. When I do this, I get closeness. When I do that, I get distance. And without any formal discussion, you begin altering yourself to maintain that closeness. This is the trap of silent conditioning. It makes you believe these changes are your own choice, when in reality, they've been planted in you like seeds. What makes silent conditioning so powerful is the absence of obvious control. If someone yells at you or tells you what to do, you can see the manipulation and resist it. But when they simply change the way they treat you, warmer here, colder there, you're left with no clear act to defend against. It feels like you're just adapting to keep the peace, when in reality you're being trained like an animal responding to cues. And because there's no open conflict, outsiders rarely see it, making it even harder for you to explain why you feel trapped. This conditioning also feeds emotional dependency. The manipulator becomes the source of both your comfort and your discomfort, and your emotional state starts to revolve around whether they're warm or distant. That unpredictability keeps you focused on them, constantly adjusting yourself to get back into their good graces. Over time, you lose touch with your authentic self, replacing your own wants and needs with whatever will keep their approval flowing. Breaking free from silent conditioning starts with identifying the pattern. Ask yourself, when do they seem warm and loving toward me? When do they seem cold and detached? Do these shifts line up with changes in my behavior? If you find that their approval always coincides with you doing what they prefer, and their distance coincides with you expressing independence, that's not coincidence. That's conditioning. Once you see it, you can begin reclaiming your autonomy by refusing to adjust yourself just to avoid their withdrawal. This might feel uncomfortable at first, because the lack of approval will trigger the same response the conditioning taught you to fix the behavior. But by holding your ground, you'll start to break the link between your self-worth and their reactions. The truth is, love, respect, and care should never be conditional rewards given only when you play by someone else's unspoken rules. Silent conditioning is nothing more than control wrapped in subtlety. And when you finally recognize that, you can stop performing for someone else's approval and start living in alignment with your true self. No silent punishments, no quiet manipulations, just freedom to be who you are without fear of emotional withdrawal. Hoovering via proxy. Breaking free from a manipulative or narcissistic relationship is one of the hardest things a person can do. You expect that once you cut contact, block their number, and create distance, you'll finally be free to heal. But with some manipulators, leaving doesn't mean the game is over. That's because they have another tactic, one that allows them to reach you without ever speaking to you directly. It's called hoovering via proxy, and it's a psychological trap designed to pull you back in using other people as their messengers. Hoovering itself is when a manipulator tries to suck you back into the relationship, like a vacuum pulling in everything around it. They might use emotional pleas, guilt, promises of change, or even threats. But when they can't contact you directly, maybe because you've blocked them, moved away, or made it clear you want no further contact, they turn to a proxy. A proxy is a third party, often someone you know and trust, a mutual friend, a family member, or even a co-worker. This person becomes the unwitting delivery system for the manipulator's carefully crafted message. The brilliance and cruelty out of hoovering via proxy is in its subtlety. The proxy often has no idea they're being used. They believe they're passing along an innocent update, offering friendly advice, or simply encouraging reconciliation. But every word they speak is part of a script the manipulator has set in motion. Instead of hearing from the abuser directly, you hear from a neutral voice. They've really changed. They feel terrible about what happened. They just want a chance to explain. Because it's coming from someone else, someone you trust, the message feels less manipulative and more believable. Imagine you've ended a relationship with someone toxic, and you've done everything right to protect your peace. Then one day a friend calls and says, "I saw them the other day. They were talking about you. They seemed really sad. I think they've realized their mistakes." In that moment, your resolve wavers. You start remembering the good times. You wonder if maybe they've truly changed. You question whether you were too harsh. All it takes is that one small seed of doubt, and the manipulator knows it's only a matter of time before you let them back in, or at least open the door for conversation. This tactic is particularly effective because it bypasses your defenses. If they contacted you directly, you'd be prepared. You'd recognize the manipulation. But when the message comes through a friend or family member, it doesn't trigger the same level of caution. It feels less like an attack and more like a gentle suggestion. That's exactly what makes it dangerous. It plays on your empathy, your longing for closure, and your hope that people can change. And it's not always about rekindling the relationship. Sometimes hoovering via proxy is about gathering information. The manipulator might tell the proxy to just check in on you, to see how you're doing, what your life looks like now, whether you're dating someone else. They frame it as concern, but in reality, it's reconnaissance. They're collecting data they can later use to reinsert themselves into your life, or to manipulate others' perception of you. Breaking free from hoovering via proxy means recognizing that not all messages are innocent, even if the messenger is. The key is to notice patterns. If people in your circle keep bringing up your ex, especially in a sympathetic way, you have to consider the possibility that you're being indirectly targeted. This doesn't mean you have to cut off the proxy entirely, but it does mean setting boundaries. You can calmly but firmly say, "I appreciate you telling me, but I'm not open to hearing updates about them. Please respect that." It's also important to remind yourself that genuine change is shown through consistent action, not filtered through someone else's words. If the only evidence you have of their transformation comes from mutual acquaintances, it's not proof. It's part of the manipulation. Someone who truly respects you and your boundaries won't try to sneak their way back into your life through others. Hoovering via proxy is proof that manipulators don't always give up when you cut them off. They simply find new ways to reach you. But when you understand the tactic, you take away its power. You stop giving weight to messages delivered on someone else's behalf, and you stay focused on the reality you've built without them. A reality that doesn't require revisiting the pain they caused. The real victory isn't just blocking them from your phone, it's blocking them from your mind and heart, no matter how many voices they try to use to get back in. Intermittent reinforcement. There is a subtle but dangerous way that manipulators and narcissists keep control over people. It doesn't always show up as obvious threats or constant cruelty. In fact, at first, it can feel like love, care, or special attention. But over time, it turns into one of the most effective traps you can fall into. This tactic is called intermittent reinforcement, and its power lies in one thing: unpredictability. Unlike consistent rewards or punishments, intermittent reinforcement works because it's random. You never know when kindness will come or when it will vanish. Humans naturally crave stability and clear patterns, so when someone gives you love in unpredictable bursts, your mind starts chasing it. You focus on getting back those rare moments of warmth, even if most of the time you feel confused or hurt. Intermittent reinforcement works by giving random rewards or punishments to keep someone in a state of constant anticipation. It could be affection, attention, an apology, or even just kindness, given at unpredictable times. The brain becomes addicted to the surprise, much like a gambler gets hooked on slot machines. You don't know when the next win will come, so you keep playing, hoping for it. Imagine this. Alex was charming and loving when he first met Mia. He gave her attention, compliments, and made her feel special. But slowly, his behavior changed. Sometimes he was warm and attentive. Other times he disappeared for days with no explanation. Then he would suddenly return, acting as if nothing had happened, offering love and apologies. Instead of walking away, Mia found herself trying harder to win back those good moments. She believed they were proof that Alex still cared. But she wasn't chasing real love. She was chasing the relief she felt when his kindness returned. Every time he pulled away, she felt anxious. Every time he came back, it was like a rush of emotional reward. Without realizing it, she was trapped in the cycle. This method works because it stops people from adjusting. If someone is always cruel, you eventually leave. If they're always kind, you feel secure. But when they switch unpredictably between the two, you stay hooked, hoping for the good side to return. That hope is what keeps you stuck. The same psychological principle is used in gambling. Slot machines give random rewards, and players keep trying because they never know when they'll win. The uncertainty keeps them addicted. In toxic relationships, intermittent reinforcement has the same effect. It keeps you emotionally invested in someone who is hurting you. Breaking free starts with recognizing the pattern. You have to see that the unpredictable kindness is not proof of real care. It's a tool for control. Once you understand that, you can stop chasing it. You can choose stability over chaos and rebuild your life without the invisible chains of uncertainty. Preemptive gaslighting. Gaslighting is already one of the most disorienting and damaging forms of psychological manipulation, making you doubt your own memory, perception, and sanity. But there's a version of it that's even more subtle, more manipulative, and more difficult to recognize. It's called preemptive gaslighting. Instead of waiting for you to notice something wrong and then denying it, the manipulator takes control before you even have a chance to think for yourself. They plant seeds of doubt in advance, shaping the way you interpret reality before it happens. Preemptive gaslighting is like a preemptive strike. They anticipate what you might see, think, or feel, and they prepare the narrative in advance to ensure that when you encounter it, you'll see it exactly the way they want you to. This is control on a whole other level, because it doesn't just make you question your version of events. It prevents you from ever forming an independent version in the first place. By the time reality reaches you, it's already been rewritten. Here's how it often plays out. Before you meet a certain person, they warn you, "By the way, that person's a bit unstable. Don't take anything they say about me seriously." Before you see a questionable text on their phone, they casually mention, "My coworker keeps texting me random things. It's annoying." Before you notice they've been acting distant, they tell you, "I've just been feeling under the weather lately. If I seem off, that's why." The moment you see the thing that would normally raise questions, your brain recalls their earlier explanation, and instead of doubting them, you doubt your own suspicion. This tactic works because it plays on one of our natural tendencies, to trust people we're close to, and to use prior context to interpret new information. If someone you trust gives you an explanation, before you even have a reason to question them, you're far more likely to accept it as truth. They're not defending themselves after the fact, which might seem suspicious. They're confiding in you ahead of time, which feels intimate, honest, and trustworthy. That false sense of openness makes the manipulation almost invisible. Preemptive gaslighting also serves as a form of insulation. It builds a protective wall around their lies and misdeeds by making you distrust any evidence or testimony that contradicts their story. If a friend later says, "I saw them with someone else," you'll immediately recall their earlier warning. "Remember, that person's jealous of me and they always make things up." If you feel hurt by their coldness, you'll remind yourself, "They told me they were stressed. I shouldn't take it personally." You begin protecting their version of reality without realizing you're doing it. Over time, preemptive gaslighting can completely rewrite the way you see the world. You start filtering every experience through the lens they've given you. They don't have to argue with you about what's real, because you've already been trained to interpret reality in their favor. This kind of manipulation is especially dangerous because it's proactive rather than reactive. It's not damage control, it's narrative control. And when someone controls the narrative, they control your thoughts, feelings, and reactions without ever having to directly challenge you. Breaking free from preemptive gaslighting starts with becoming aware of how you form your opinions. Ask yourself, do I believe this because I've seen it and judged it for myself, or because someone told me what to think before I ever had the chance to see it? Notice if the same person is always warning you about how to interpret situations, people, or events. Genuine friends and partners might give you context, but they won't constantly plant seeds that make you doubt your own instincts or the credibility of others. The real test is to hold back from immediately accepting any narrative, even from someone you love, until you've had the chance to experience the situation yourself. Healthy relationships are built on mutual trust, but that trust doesn't mean surrendering your independent judgment. Once you start protecting your right to see things with your own eyes and think with your own mind, the grip of preemptive gaslighting begins to break. Because the truth is this: people who truly care about you will want you to see reality clearly, even if it's uncomfortable. People who want to control you will work to make sure you never see reality at all. Self-victimizing projection. One of the most disarming and manipulative tactics a person can use is to position themselves as the victim, not just occasionally, but as a consistent strategy to avoid accountability and control the narrative. This is called self-victimizing projection, and it's more than just someone feeling sorry for themselves. It's a deliberate reversal of roles, where the person causing harm convinces everyone, including you, that they are the ones being harmed. At its core, self-victimizing projection is a psychological sleight of hand. The manipulator takes the focus off their own behavior and turns it back on you. They shift the spotlight so quickly that by the time you try to defend yourself, you're already on trial. You could be confronting them for something they clearly did, lying, breaking a promise, crossing a boundary, and instead of addressing the issue, they start telling a story about how you have hurt them. Suddenly, you're no longer discussing their betrayal. You're defending yourself against accusations you didn't even see coming. The brilliance of this tactic is that it plays directly into human empathy. Most people don't want to see someone they care about in pain. So when the manipulator starts crying, recounting a traumatic childhood, or telling you how everyone misunderstands them, you feel a surge of guilt and compassion. You back off from the confrontation, not because they've proven their innocence, but because you don't want to hurt them further. And in that moment, the original issue, the harm they caused, is quietly pushed aside. Self-victimizing projection can be overt or subtle. Sometimes it's dramatic, tears, shaking voices, long speeches about how unfair life has been. Other times, it's quiet, a distant tone, a sigh, a single sentence like, "I guess I'm just the bad guy no matter what I do." The goal is always the same, to make you feel like you're attacking someone who is already wounded. Once they've established that emotional position, they gain the upper hand. You go from being the person holding them accountable to the person offering comfort. This tactic also works powerfully in public settings. If the manipulator can get others to see them as the victim, they can rally sympathy and turn the group against you. They might tell friends, "I've tried so hard with them, but nothing I do is good enough." Or, "They're always blaming me for things I didn't do." By framing the story in a way that erases their own actions and highlights only their supposed suffering, they can paint you as cold, unreasonable, or even abusive. This doesn't just protect them from accountability, it isolates you from support. Over time, self-victimizing projection wears you down. You start to feel like the aggressor every time you bring up an issue. You might even stop confronting them altogether because you know it will only end with you feeling guilty. That's exactly what they want, a relationship where you never question them, because every attempt to do so flips the script and puts you in the wrong. Breaking free from this manipulation means refusing to let emotional theatrics derail the conversation. If they shift into victim mode when you raise a concern, bring the focus back to the original point. "I understand you're upset, but right now we're talking about what happened yesterday. Let's stay with that." It's not about dismissing their feelings, it's about not allowing their feelings to erase their actions. It also means recognizing the difference between genuine vulnerability and strategic vulnerability. Genuine vulnerability seeks understanding and connection. Strategic vulnerability seeks to avoid responsibility and manipulate sympathy. One builds trust, the other destroys it. And if you notice that every time they open up it conveniently absolves them of wrongdoing, you're not dealing with honesty, you're dealing with control. The hardest part of escaping self-victimizing projection is fighting the guilt it triggers. But once you understand that empathy can be weaponized, you can protect it. You can reserve it for those who use your compassion to heal and grow, not for those who use it to hide from the truth. Because real victims don't need to twist the story to be heard, and real love doesn't require you to surrender your reality just to keep someone else comfortable in their version of events. Plausible deniability. Plausible deniability is one of the most calculated and strategic forms of manipulation because it's built on one simple goal: never leaving enough proof to be held accountable. It's when someone deliberately operates in a gray area, saying or doing things in a way that can always be explained away, excused or reinterpreted. On the surface, they may seem harmless, but underneath, every move is carefully designed so that if you call them out, they can look you straight in the eye and say, "That's not what I meant," or "You're reading too much into it." This tactic works because it plays with ambiguity. Every comment, every action, every decision is done just subtly enough to leave doubt. They might use tone, implication, or timing to communicate something hurtful, but never the exact words. They might create situations where harm is done, but there's no direct evidence linking them to the damage. If you confront them, they can twist it around and make you feel like you're the one imagining things. And because their behavior is never blatant, outsiders often side with them, leaving you isolated and unsure. In relationships, plausible deniability might look like constant jokes at your expense. They'll say something cutting or humiliating, then quickly add, "Relax, I was just kidding." If you seem hurt, they flip it back on you. "Wow, you're so sensitive." The insult is real, but the delivery is wrapped in enough humor to give them an escape route. They can deny any ill intent and leave you wondering if maybe you are overreacting. In the workplace, it might look like a manager who withholds important information but never explicitly says they're doing it. Later, when a project fails, they can claim, "I thought you already knew," or "I never told you not to do that." They operate in the shadows, ensuring that blame can always be shifted or shared, but never fully land on them. The psychological power of plausible deniability comes from the fact that it forces you into a defensive position. You can feel something is wrong, but you can't pin it down with clear evidence. You're left trying to argue about intention, something you can't prove. This uncertainty chips away at your confidence. Over time, you start second-guessing your perceptions, doubting your memory, and even questioning whether the problem is real at all. That's exactly where the manipulator wants you, in a fog of confusion, where they can keep acting without consequence. What makes this tactic especially dangerous is how it allows the manipulator to maintain a spotless public image. Because they never leave a smoking gun, they can present themselves as reasonable, innocent, and misunderstood. If you speak up about the way they treat you, you risk looking irrational to others. "They would never do that," people might say. "I'm sure you're misunderstanding them." And just like that, the manipulator has not only avoided accountability, but has also reinforced your isolation. Breaking free from plausible deniability requires shifting the focus away from proving intent and onto the impact. You don't have to prove what they meant. You only have to acknowledge how it made you feel and whether it aligns with the standards you have for how you should be treated. If someone repeatedly leaves you hurt, confused, or questioning your reality, the pattern is enough. You don't need a signed confession to decide you deserve better. It also means learning to trust your instincts, even when there's no hard evidence. Manipulators thrive on the gap between what happened and what can be proven, but your boundaries don't have to meet the standard of a courtroom. If their jokes, coincidences, or accidents keep cutting you down, that's reason enough to act. The truth is, plausible deniability isn't a sign of innocence. It's a sign of skill in avoiding responsibility. It's the mark of someone who knows exactly what they're doing, but is careful enough to make sure you can never fully call them out. And once you see that, you can stop wasting your energy trying to catch them in a confession and instead focus on removing yourself from the game entirely. Because in the end, you don't need to prove they meant to hurt you. You only need to decide that your life is too valuable to be lived in the shadow of constant doubt. Reactive abuse. Reactive abuse is one of the most insidious traps in manipulation because it flips the truth upside down. It's when the victim of ongoing mistreatment is pushed so far, for so long, that they finally react, and that reaction is then used as proof that they are the real abuser. It's the perfect reversal. The person who has been provoking, insulting, or emotionally attacking you for weeks, months, or even years suddenly gets to play the role of the wounded, innocent party, while you are left looking like the aggressor. Here's how it works. A manipulator will provoke you relentlessly, often in ways that don't leave obvious evidence. They might use sarcasm, passive-aggressive remarks, constant nitpicking, or subtle disrespect. They might push your boundaries over and over, knowing you'll try to be the bigger person and not react. But the provocations are never random. They're calculated to slowly chip away at your patience and emotional control. Then, At the exact right moment, they'll say or do something so cutting that you snap. Maybe you raise your voice, maybe you curse, maybe you slam a door, cry, or fire back with a harsh comment, and in that moment they get exactly what they wanted. Now, instead of the months of quiet mistreatment that led to this breaking point, all anyone sees is your reaction. They'll point to it and say, "Look how unstable you are," or "See, this is what I deal with." They might even record the moment, take screenshots, or run straight to mutual friends to tell them about your explosive behavior. And because they've been calm, composed, or even smiling while pushing you to the edge, it's easy for outsiders to believe them. The cruel genius of reactive abuse is that it weaponizes your very humanity against you. Everyone has a breaking point. No one can remain perfectly calm under relentless pressure forever. But when you finally break, the manipulator will freeze that moment in time and erase all the context that came before it. To the outside world, and eventually maybe even to yourself, it can start to look like you're the problem. In toxic relationships, this cycle becomes self-perpetuating. The more you react, the more evidence they collect. And the more they convince you that you're the unstable one, the easier it is for them to maintain control. You might start apologizing for your reactions, promising to stay calm next time, while they continue to provoke you with impunity. Over time, you lose sight of the fact that your reactions are responses to abuse, not random bursts of cruelty. Breaking free from reactive abuse requires recognizing the setup before it reaches its boiling point. You have to learn to spot the pattern, the repeated provocations, the calculated boundary pushes, the baiting that escalates just enough to get under your skin without crossing a line that others can clearly see. The moment you start to notice the cycle, you can begin stepping out of it. This might mean physically removing yourself from the situation when you feel yourself getting pushed to that edge. It might mean refusing to engage with certain provocations altogether. But here's the hard truth. The real solution often isn't just staying calm. It's removing yourself entirely from people who build their power by breaking down your composure. Because even if you learn to hold your tongue, they'll keep finding ways to provoke you until they get a reaction. Their control depends on it. It's also important to stop carrying guilt for the moments you've reacted in the past. Your reaction doesn't erase the abuse that caused it. It doesn't make you the villain, it makes you human. And once you start seeing the full timeline instead of the carefully cropped snapshot they use against you, you'll realize you were never the one who started the fight. You were the one surviving it. The truth is, reactive abuse is just another way manipulators rewrite the story so they can keep hurting you without consequences. Once you refuse to let them control the narrative, you take back your power. Because the real abuser is never the person who finally screams. It's the person who pushed them to the edge in the first place. Epistemic injustice. Epistemic injustice is a manipulation so subtle that it can poison your perception of reality without you even noticing. At its core, it's about undermining your credibility, making your thoughts, feelings, and experiences seem less valid, less believable, and less important. It's not just that they disagree with you, it's that they position themselves either openly or quietly as the authority over what is real, what is reasonable, and what is worth believing. And in time, this robs you of confidence in your own voice. The term comes from philosophy, but in toxic dynamics, it plays out in deeply personal ways. A manipulator practicing epistemic injustice doesn't just want to win arguments, they want to become the filter through which reality passes. They chip away at your ability to trust your own mind by planting subtle doubts, poking holes in your perspective, or reframing your insights as irrational, exaggerated, or naive. The goal isn't to convince you of one single lie. It's to make you doubt everything you think so they can insert their version of events as the only one that makes sense. This can start small. Maybe you tell them about something strange you noticed at work, and they reply, "You're reading too much into it." Maybe you recall an event from years ago, and they smirk and say, "That's not how it happened." The correction might seem harmless or even helpful, but over time these moments accumulate. Every time they dismiss, downplay, or overwrite your experiences, they send a silent message. You can't be trusted to understand the world accurately. In more advanced forms, epistemic injustice becomes systematic. They develop a pattern of discrediting you, not only in private, but in front of others. You might be telling a story in a group, and they interrupt to fix a detail or clarify what really happened. It's framed as harmless banter or playful teasing, but what it really does is position them as the keeper of truth while you're subtly cast as unreliable. Over time, this doesn't just change how you see yourself, it changes how others see you too. And once your credibility is weakened in the eyes of others, it's much easier for them to manipulate the narrative about you when you're not there to defend yourself. The psychological damage here runs deep. Humans rely on our memories and perceptions to navigate life, to know who to trust, to make decisions, to form an identity. When someone systematically undermines that, you begin to second-guess not just specific situations, but your very ability to interpret reality. You might catch yourself thinking, maybe I did get it wrong. Maybe I am overreacting. You become hesitant to speak up, afraid you'll be corrected again, and before long, you stop asserting your perspective altogether. And here's the trap. Epistemic injustice is easy for the manipulator to disguise. If you call them out, they can claim they were just helping clarify the truth, trying to keep things accurate, or making sure you don't embarrass yourself. To outsiders, this can sound reasonable. Who wouldn't want accuracy? But in truth, accuracy isn't their goal, control is. They're not clarifying to help you, they're clarifying to own the truth. One of the most sinister aspects of this tactic is how it can be paired with other forms of abuse. If they ever need to discredit your account of their harmful behavior, the groundwork is already laid. You know how they are. They always exaggerate. They don't need to refute your claims in detail. They've already trained others to see you as unreliable. This way, even if you tell the truth, it's easier for them to make it disappear in the court of public opinion. Breaking free from epistemic injustice requires reclaiming your trust in your own mind. This doesn't mean assuming you're always right. It means recognizing that your perspective matters, that your experiences are valid, and that someone who genuinely respects you will engage with your viewpoint instead of reflexively dismissing it. You can start small, keeping a journal of events so you have your own written record, noticing patterns in when and how they correct you, and surrounding yourself with people who treat your voice as worthy of being heard without constant adjustment. Most importantly, you have to see through the facade of their authority. They're not the final word on reality, and neither is anyone else. A healthy relationship doesn't require one person to be the gatekeeper of truth. It allows both people's perspectives to exist side by side, even when they differ. The truth is this: epistemic injustice is not about accuracy. It's about erasure. It's about controlling the narrative by making sure yours never carries weight. And the moment you see that, you stop asking them for permission to believe yourself, because your reality, your memories, and your perspective are yours, and no amount of correction can take them away unless you let it. Grey rock. Probing the grey rock method is a well-known defense against manipulative or toxic people. The idea is simple. You make yourself as uninteresting and unresponsive as possible, like a dull, lifeless rock. No drama, no emotional reactions, no engaging with their bait. The goal is to starve them of the attention and emotional energy they crave, so they eventually lose interest and move on. But here's the thing. Manipulators know this tactic exists, and the more skilled ones have developed a counter-move. It's called grey rock probing. This is when the manipulator tests your defenses, searching for cracks in your calm exterior. They don't just accept your disinterest. They poke, prod, and subtly shift their approach until they find something that makes you react. Once they do, they've got you hooked again. Grey rock probing is rarely obvious. It doesn't usually start with a loud confrontation or outright insult. Instead, it comes in small, strategic nudges. They might send you a message that sounds casual, but contains a hidden jab. Something like, "Hope you're doing better than last time we talked," or "Saw something today that reminded me of you, but maybe you wouldn't care." The words themselves might not sound aggressive, but they're chosen to stir curiosity, defensiveness, or old emotions. If that doesn't work, they'll change tactics. Maybe they'll try nostalgia, bringing up a happy memory from the past. Maybe they'll test your empathy, telling you they're going through a hard time. Or maybe they'll use indirect methods, sending a mutual friend to deliver a story designed to make you respond. Each attempt is a probe, a gentle knock on the door to see if you'll open it. The psychology behind this is simple. Manipulators feed off emotional engagement. It doesn't matter if that engagement is love, anger, or frustration. As long as you're giving them a piece of your emotional energy, they've succeeded. When you grey rock, you cut off that supply. But probing is their way of mapping your triggers, finding out what still gets through your armor. Once they find one, they can exploit it over and over again. What makes grey rock probing so effective is that it often disguises itself as harmless interaction. If you confront them, they can say, "I was just checking in," or "I was just being friendly." This gives them plausible deniability while still gathering the information they want. And because their attempts are spaced out and varied, you might not even notice the pattern until you realize you've been slowly drawn back into conversation. Here's an example. You've been avoiding your toxic ex for months, staying neutral and unresponsive. Then they send you a short message. You wouldn't believe what happened to your favorite coffee shop. You might ignore it at first, but the curiosity nags at you. A few hours later you reply, "What happened?" And just like that they have their opening. They'll turn the conversation toward themselves, slip in emotional hooks. And before long the dynamic you worked so hard to escape starts creeping back in. The only real defense against grey rock probing is consistency. That means recognizing that every probe, no matter how small, no matter how harmless it seems, is part of an attempt to re-establish the connection on their terms. If you give in to even one, you reinforce their belief that you can still be reached. And once they know where the crack is, they'll keep pressing it. It also helps to spot the emotional bait for what it is. If something they say triggers curiosity, guilt, or nostalgia, pause and ask yourself, would I be engaging with this if it came from someone I trust? Or am I only tempted because it came from them? If the answer is the latter, it's a sign that your reaction is exactly what they were fishing for. Grey rock works when it's unwavering. The manipulator will often give up when they realize their energy is being wasted. But until then, expect probing. Expect tests. Expect sudden, out-of-character kindness or random, accidental encounters. They're not accidents. They're the last attempts to see if the door is still open. The truth is, you don't owe them curiosity. You don't owe them closure. And you certainly don't owe them a reaction. Every time you resist the probe, you remind them, and yourself, that your peace is not for sale. Isolation cloaked as protection. One of the most dangerous forms of control is isolation, cutting you off from friends, family, and support systems so that the manipulator becomes your primary, or even your only, source of connection. But in healthy relationships, outright isolation is rare. In toxic ones, it's often disguised, dressed up as love, care, or concern. This is isolation cloaked as protection, the slow, deliberate removal of your outside connections, under the comforting illusion that it's all being done for your safety. It rarely starts with, "You can't see your friends anymore." That would be too obvious. Instead, it begins with gentle suggestions and subtle criticisms. Maybe they say, "I don't think your friend really has your best interests at heart," or "Your family stresses you out too much. You're happier when it's just us." It's framed as an observation, maybe even as emotional insight, and because it sounds protective, not controlling, you don't see it for what it is. From there, the limits increase gradually. They might express concern about specific people in your life, labeling them toxic or jealous, without giving clear reasons. They might question why you'd want to spend time with certain friends when you could be with them instead. They might start creating subtle guilt whenever you make plans without them, sighing, acting distant, or saying things like, "I just miss you when you're gone." Over time, it becomes easier to cancel plans than to deal with their disappointment. The brilliance and cruelty of this tactic is that it masquerades as love. They position themselves as your protector, the only one who truly understands you, the one keeping you safe from people who don't deserve you. In the beginning, it can feel flattering. It can even feel romantic, like you found someone who wants to shield you from the world. But protection becomes prison the moment it limits your freedom to choose. Once the isolation takes hold, your perspective begins to shift. Without the voices of friends or family to provide balance, Their version of reality becomes the only one you hear. If they treat you badly, there's no one to point it out. If you start to question the relationship, they can convince you that you're overreacting, because there's no outside feedback to counter their narrative. And if you ever think about leaving, the idea of doing it alone feels terrifying. In some cases, the protection is framed around shared enemies. They might say, we don't need anyone else, and people just want to tear us apart. They create a you and me against the world dynamic, which not only isolates you from others, but also strengthens your emotional bond with them. It's a clever psychological trick. The more you feel you have to stand together against outsiders, the harder it is to see that the real threat is coming from inside the relationship. Breaking free from isolation, cloaked as protection, starts with recognizing that love and control can sometimes look similar at first, but they feel very different over time. Love says, I want you to have a rich, full life, even if it means spending time without me. Control says, I feel safer when you limit your life to me. Protection empowers you. Isolation disempowers you. The difference lies in whether you're being given choices or having them quietly taken away. The key is to listen for patterns in their concerns. If every person they warn you about is someone who might notice or challenge their behavior, that's not protection. That's strategy. If the bad influences they point out just happen to be the people who care about you most, you have to ask yourself why. Real protectors don't fear you having strong connections. Manipulators do, because strong connections mean you might see the truth. And the hardest part? Rebuilding what was lost. Isolation shrinks your world, sometimes to the size of a single person. Reconnecting with others after that can feel uncomfortable, even wrong, because you've been conditioned to believe it's unsafe. But the more you reach out, the more you'll remember what freedom feels like, and the more you remember, the less convincing their protection will be. The truth is, love doesn't lock the door behind you. It doesn't make the world smaller so you'll stay put. It doesn't claim to keep you safe while quietly dismantling your support system. Real love stands beside you while you walk into the world, not between you and the people who care about you. Weaponized neglect. Neglect is often seen as passive, the absence of action, the failure to care, the quiet erosion of attention and support. But in toxic dynamics, neglect can be far from accidental. It can be deliberate, calculated, weaponized. This is when someone uses the withdrawal of care, affection, or attention as an active tool to control you, punish you, or keep you in a state of emotional dependency. Weaponized neglect doesn't always look like cruelty on the surface. In fact, it often hides behind excuses like, I've just been busy, I need space, or I thought you didn't need me to check in. But underneath, the timing is too precise, the silence too strategic, and the distance too selective to be coincidence. They know when you're most vulnerable, when you need reassurance, support, or presence. And that's exactly when they disappear. This tactic works because humans are wired to notice the absence of what we've grown to expect. If someone who's usually attentive suddenly becomes distant, our brains immediately start searching for a reason. We replay our interactions, wondering if we said something wrong. We become anxious, restless, and eager to restore the connection. And in that vulnerable state, we're more likely to bend to their unspoken demands just to make the coldness stop. Weaponized neglect is often paired with intermittent reinforcement, the occasional return of warmth just when you're about to give up. They might vanish emotionally for days, then suddenly show up with affection or kindness, making you feel relief so powerful, it overshadows the neglect that came before it. This creates a loop. You begin to accept periods of abandonment as the price you pay for moments of closeness. In romantic relationships, this might look like a partner who withdraws intimacy whenever you set a boundary. The moment you assert yourself, they grow distant, stop replying to your messages, or become emotionally unavailable. The silence says what their words don't. Step back in line and maybe I'll come back. In friendships, it can be the person who goes quiet and excludes you from plans whenever you express a need or call out bad behavior. In families, it can be a parent who withholds approval or attention to make you comply. The cruelty of weaponized neglect lies in its invisibility. There's no shouting, no obvious blow-up, nothing outsiders can easily point to as abuse. If you try to explain it, it can sound petty. They didn't call me back, or they ignored me for a week. But the impact isn't petty at all. It's psychological starvation. Just like physical starvation, the deprivation of emotional connection makes you weaker, more desperate, and easier to control. Over time, you start to normalize the pattern. You learn to tread carefully, to avoid topics or behaviors that might trigger withdrawal. You might even preemptively apologize or give in to demands before they're voiced, just to keep the neglect from happening again. And in doing so, you shrink yourself, molding your life to fit within the boundaries they set with their silence. Breaking free from weaponized neglect requires two realizations. First, that affection and attention are not rewards you should have to earn. They're basic components of any healthy relationship. Second, that someone who withholds those things as punishment is not protecting their own needs. They're controlling yours. Once you see neglect as a deliberate act rather than an accident, you can stop taking it personally and start seeing it for the power play it is. From there, you have to set your own standard. If someone repeatedly disappears when you need them most, they're telling you exactly where you stand in their priorities. And no matter what they say when they return, their actions speak louder. You have to decide whether you're willing to keep living in a cycle where love and connection are dangled in front of you like a prize, or whether you'll walk away and find people who give without making you beg. Because the truth is, real love doesn't keep you guessing whether it will show up. It doesn't withhold presence as punishment. It doesn't turn absence into a weapon. Love stays. And if it can't stay, it explains. It doesn't vanish and make you chase it. Guilt by omission. Most people think of guilt as something that comes from being openly accused of doing wrong. But one of the most manipulative ways to create guilt is not by what's said, but by what's not said. This is guilt by omission, the quiet, deliberate withholding of information, context, or clarification in a way that makes you feel responsible for something you didn't actually do, or makes you carry shame that doesn't belong to you. It's not about lying outright. In fact, guilt by omission often works better when the manipulator avoids direct falsehoods. Instead, they create a vacuum of information and let your mind fill in the worst possible explanation. They withhold the full truth about a situation, leave out key facts, or carefully avoid saying something that would clear your name. And because human beings naturally hate uncertainty, you end up inventing a story to make sense of the silence. A story that almost always casts you as the one at fault. Here's an example. Imagine a friend suddenly grows cold and distant. They don't tell you why. They don't accuse you of anything. They just stop returning messages and give you short, flat replies. You start combing through your recent interactions, replaying conversations, wondering if you said something wrong. That's exactly how guilt by omission works. They never directly accuse you, but they let your imagination do the work of punishing yourself. In romantic relationships, it can be even more damaging. A partner might become withdrawn or moody without explanation, knowing you'll interpret it as being caused by something you did. They might sigh or roll their eyes at you without elaborating, then stay silent if you ask what's wrong. That silence isn't passive, it's a form of control. By refusing to explain, they keep you in a constant state of self-blame and uncertainty, making you more eager to please them just to restore harmony. The danger of guilt by omission is that it's nearly impossible to defend yourself against. If they don't openly accuse you, there's nothing to refute. You can't say that's not true because nothing has been stated. All you can do is twist yourself into knots trying to guess the invisible. Offense and fix it. And often once you've exhausted yourself apologizing and making amends, they'll suddenly become warm and kind again, reinforcing the idea that it was your job all along to repair the situation, even if you never actually caused it. Another layer to this manipulation is how it can protect the manipulator's image. Because they never directly say anything, they can later claim innocence. "I never accused you of anything," they might say. "You're the one who assumed." And technically they're right, you did assume. But what they won't admit is that they carefully orchestrated the silence and ambiguity to make sure you did exactly that. Over time, guilt by omission rewires the way you think. You become hyper-aware of every interaction, scanning for signs that you've upset someone. You start preemptively apologizing for things you haven't done, just to avoid the discomfort of their withdrawal. You may even stop expressing your own needs, fearing that doing so might create another silent, punishing gap. Breaking free from this manipulation starts with understanding that silence is not always neutral. Sometimes it's weaponized. If someone repeatedly leaves you feeling confused, blamed or ashamed without giving you clear information, that's not emotional maturity. It's control. You have the right to clarity. You have the right to say, if something's wrong, tell me directly. And if they refuse, you have the right to stop carrying guilt that was handed to you without explanation. The truth is, genuine relationships don't rely on silence to communicate displeasure. They don't let misunderstandings fester just to make you suffer. They don't watch you struggle under the weight of assumed guilt and do nothing to lift it. In healthy connections, if there's a problem, it's spoken, because the goal is resolution, not control. Double-binding compliments. Not all compliments are genuine. Some are weapons dressed as kindness. A double-binding compliment is a statement that sounds like praise on the surface, but is designed to trap you no matter how you respond. It's a form of manipulation that uses flattery as the bait, while the hook is a subtle insult, judgment, or pressure that keeps you in a no-win situation. A double-binding compliment always contains a hidden message, one that forces you into a corner. If you accept it, you validate the manipulator's framing. If you reject it, you risk looking defensive, insecure, or ungrateful. Either way, they gain control of the interaction. And because it's wrapped in something that sounds nice, calling it out can make you look unreasonable to anyone who hears it. Here's a simple example. Wow, you actually look good today. On the surface, it's praise, but the word actually plants the idea that you usually don't. If you say, thank you, you indirectly agree that you normally look bad. If you push back, what do you mean by actually, toy? They can feign innocence. I was just giving you a compliment. Why are you so sensitive? In toxic dynamics, these kinds of compliments can get more sophisticated. They might be disguised as encouragement. You're so much more attractive when you try. Or as admiration. You're smart for someone who didn't go to college. Or as comparison. You're way better than my ex. She could never keep herself in shape. Each one traps you into agreeing with a subtle criticism while making it look like they've just been nice to you. The power of a double-binding compliment lies in its psychological confusion. Your brain recognizes the positive tone, but also catches the negative undercurrent. This creates cognitive dissonance, a tension between the words you hear and the feeling they give you. That tension makes you more likely to focus on resolving the discomfort rather than confronting the manipulator directly. You might end up overcompensating, trying harder to meet the standard implied in the compliment, or working to avoid the hidden criticism buried inside it. Over time, these compliments can rewire how you see yourself. If you constantly hear praise that comes with a catch, you start to believe that your value is conditional, that you're only attractive when you try, only smart compared to someone worse, only worthy when you meet their shifting expectations. The compliment becomes a leash, keeping you in a cycle of trying to earn approval that's never fully given without strings attached. And here's the most insidious part. Double-binding compliments make it difficult to defend your boundaries. If you point out the insult hidden inside, you're accused of overreacting. If you accept the compliment, you let the manipulator's framing of you sink deeper. Either way, they win, because the interaction stays under their control. Breaking free from this requires developing the ability to spot the hidden bind and refuse to play the game. You don't have to accept or reject the compliment, you can sidestep it entirely. That might mean responding with a neutral, or changing the subject. You don't owe them validation for words that are designed to undermine you. It also helps to notice patterns. If someone consistently gives praise that leaves you feeling small, self-conscious, or indebted, it's not praise. It's control disguised as kindness. And once you stop rewarding it with emotional engagement, it loses its power. Because in a healthy relationship, compliments don't trap you. They don't make you choose between agreeing to an insult or looking unreasonable. They don't force you into a bind just to watch you squirm. Real compliments lift you without pushing you down first. They're not cages made of pretty words. They're open doors that let you walk taller. Dosed affection. Affection is supposed to be a natural expression of love, care, and connection. In healthy relationships, it flows freely. It's not rationed out like a rare luxury, But in toxic dynamics, affection can become a calculated currency, given in carefully measured doses, always on the manipulator's terms. This is dosed affection, the art of controlling someone by controlling when, how, and how much warmth they receive. The first dose is always intoxicating. In the beginning, they might overwhelm you with love, attention, and closeness. They make you feel seen in a way no one else ever has. They memorize your likes, your quirks, the way you laugh, and they mirror back the version of yourself you most want to believe in. This early abundance of affection is not random, it's an investment. They're building emotional dependence, training your nervous system to crave their approval and presence. Then slowly the doses begin to shrink. The hugs are shorter, the compliments are rarer, the eye contact lingers less. The texts take longer to arrive. But when you notice the change and start to worry, they give you just enough affection to keep you hooked. One warm night after weeks of coldness, one passionate kiss after days of disinterest, one sudden, unexpected, "I love you," just when you were starting to doubt they felt anything at all. This push and pull is deliberate. By rationing affection, they create a system of intermittent reinforcement, the same psychological mechanism that keeps people addicted to slot machines. You never know when the reward will come, so you keep investing your energy, hoping the next pull will pay off. The unpredictability makes each small dose feel more valuable, more intense, more worth chasing. The cruel genius of dosed affection is that it turns love into a prize you have to earn. The manipulator becomes both the giver and the gatekeeper, controlling your emotional highs and lows like a drug dealer deciding when you get your next fix. And because the affection is inconsistent, you start to work harder for it, becoming more agreeable, more forgiving, more willing to tolerate bad behavior just to get that next hit of warmth. This pattern doesn't just affect how you see them, it changes how you see yourself. Over time, you stop believing you deserve love without conditions. You start measuring your worth by how much affection you can win from them, and when they withdraw, you blame yourself thinking, "If I were better, they'd love me more." In reality, the withdrawal isn't about you at all. It's about control. By keeping you emotionally hungry, they ensure you stay focused on pleasing them instead of questioning the imbalance in the relationship. And because the affection does come back every so often, it's easy to convince yourself things aren't that bad. You remember the good moments vividly, and those memories keep you holding on through the bad ones. In romantic relationships, dosed affection might mean a partner who is only loving after you've done something for them, cooking a meal, agreeing with them in an argument, or meeting one of their demands. In friendships, it can be the friend who's warm and attentive only when they need something, then distant or dismissive the rest of the time. In families, it can be a parent who shows pride and love only when you achieve, but withdraws emotionally when you fail to meet their expectations. Breaking free from dosed affection means refusing to measure your worth by someone else's rationing. It means recognizing that real love doesn't arrive in controlled portions, and it doesn't disappear as punishment. You have to step back and ask, if the doses stopped tomorrow, would I still feel loved or would I be empty? The answer to that question often reveals more than you want to admit. The truth is, love that's rationed isn't love at all. It's leverage. And the moment you stop chasing doses, you begin to detox from the cycle. That's when you remember, affection isn't something you should have to beg for. It's something that flows freely from people who truly care. Love withdrawal. Love withdrawal is one of the most emotionally devastating tactics in manipulation because it strikes at the very foundation of human connection. It's the deliberate removal of affection, attention, and emotional intimacy, not because the feelings are gone, but because the manipulator knows exactly how much it will hurt you. They weaponize the absence of love to control your behavior, punish you for defiance, or push you into compliance. The cruelty lies in its timing. Love withdrawal never happens randomly. It usually comes right after you've said something they didn't want to hear, stood up for yourself, or set a boundary they didn't like. One moment you're in their good graces. The texts are frequent, the affection is warm, the connection feels alive. The next moment the warmth vanishes, the conversations dry up, their tone turns flat, or they disappear entirely, and the silence screams louder than any insult could. Humans are wired for connection. When love is suddenly taken away, it doesn't just make us sad, it triggers deep biological panic. Your nervous system goes into overdrive, searching for the lost bond, trying to repair whatever went wrong. This is exactly what the manipulator counts on. They know the withdrawal will make you restless, anxious, and desperate to restore harmony, and in that desperation, you're far more likely to apologize for things you didn't do, compromise your boundaries, or accept treatment you would normally reject, just to make the pain stop. Love withdrawal works because it taps into a fear far older than the relationship itself, the fear of abandonment. Many victims of this tactic don't even realize that what they're experiencing is manipulation. They just believe they must have messed up and need to fix it. The manipulator reinforces this belief by reintroducing love only after you've bent to their will. The moment you comply, the affection returns, almost as if nothing happened. This cycle trains you to associate obedience with love and resistance with loss. In romantic relationships, love withdrawal might look like a partner who becomes cold and distant every time you disagree with them, only to make up the second you give in. In friendships, it can be the person who stops talking to you or ignores your messages when you don't do what they want. In families, it can be a parent who withholds warmth and approval until you meet their expectations. The behavior may vary, but the underlying message is always the same. My love is conditional, and I can take it away whenever I choose. The psychological toll is enormous. Over time, you begin to police your own behavior, anticipating what might cause the withdrawal and avoiding it at all costs. You may stop expressing your needs, suppress your opinions, and sacrifice parts of your identity just to keep the love flowing. The manipulator doesn't have to force you into compliance anymore. You start doing it to yourself. What makes love withdrawal even more insidious is how it's often paired with love bombing in the early stages. At the start of the relationship, they may have overwhelmed you with affection, attention, and validation, creating a deep emotional dependency. Once they know you're hooked, they start pulling that love away in calculated intervals. The contrast between the high of love bombing and the low of withdrawal keeps you addicted, always chasing the return of that initial intensity. Breaking free from love withdrawal means understanding that healthy love doesn't vanish as a form of punishment. Real affection isn't conditional on your submission. The challenge is retraining your nervous system to withstand the discomfort of their absence without rushing to fix it. That might mean sitting with the silence, reminding yourself that their withdrawal says more about them than it does about you, and refusing to earn back what should never have been taken away. The truth is, love that disappears every time you stand your ground isn't love, it's control. And the most powerful way to break the cycle is to stop chasing it. Because once you stop letting someone weaponize their love against you, you take away their most powerful tool for keeping you small. Bait and switch personality. The bait and switch personality is one of the most disorienting manipulation tactics because it turns the person you thought you knew into someone you barely recognize. It's when a manipulator presents one version of themselves in the beginning, the charming, attentive, loving version, only to gradually or suddenly reveal a very different, often harmful personality once you're emotionally invested. The bait is the ideal partner, friend, or ally they use to hook you. The switch is the real version that emerges when they know you're unlikely to walk away. In the early stage, the bait is flawless. They study you closely, learning what you value, what you admire, what makes you feel safe. Then they reflect those traits back to you like a mirror showing the most appealing reflection. If you value kindness, they'll be endlessly considerate. If you admire ambition, they'll talk about big dreams and future plans. If you crave emotional safety, they'll listen to you with deep empathy. The bait phase is designed to convince you that you've found someone who fits you perfectly, sometimes even soulmate material. But the switch doesn't happen overnight. It's gradual, almost imperceptible at first. A sharp comment here. A withdrawal of affection there. Small moments of selfishness or disregard that you brush off because, after all, you know who they really are, or at least who they were when you met them. The early version becomes your reference point, the proof you cling to when things get rough. They're just stressed right now. They'll go back to how they were. The cruel genius of the bait and switch is that the manipulator occasionally does revert to the bait personality, just long enough to keep you believing it's still there underneath. After weeks of coldness, they might suddenly be warm and attentive again. After months of criticism, they might shower you with praise. This inconsistency keeps you hooked, always chasing the return of the person you first fell for. You don't realize that the bait wasn't the real them. It was a performance designed to secure your trust and commitment. In romantic relationships, the switch might reveal itself as controlling behavior, emotional neglect, or outright cruelty. In friendships, it can be a shift from supportive to competitive or undermining. In workplaces, it might be a boss who was encouraging and approachable during your interview, but becomes demanding, dismissive, or exploitative once you've accepted the job. The core pattern is the same. They show you exactly what you want to see until leaving becomes harder than staying. The psychological trap here is powerful because it plays on hope and memory. You keep holding on for the person they used to be, not realizing that version never truly existed. The bait was always temporary, a lure to get you into position. The switch is the reality, the unfiltered personality they can reveal only once they feel certain of your loyalty, dependence, or inability to escape. Breaking free from this manipulation starts with a brutal but necessary truth. The way someone treats you consistently over time is who they are. The early version was not the real them, it was a strategy. If you notice that the good moments are rare and unpredictable, while the bad ones are the norm, you have to stop chasing the high of the bait and start accepting the pattern of the switch. The hardest part is letting go of the fantasy they built. You're not just losing the person in front of you, you're losing the person you thought they were. That grief can keep you stuck, replaying early memories, trying to figure out what went wrong. But the answer isn't in what you did. It's in the fact that they never intended to sustain the bait version forever. The truth is, love, friendship, and respect don't require bait to begin with. They don't lure you in under false pretenses. And they certainly don't transform into something toxic once you're committed. Real connection stays consistent. It doesn't turn itself on and off based on whether you're still hooked. Identity erosion. Identity erosion is one of the most silent yet devastating forms of manipulation because it doesn't take your freedom all at once. It takes you, piece by piece. It's the slow, deliberate wearing down of your sense of self until the person you were before the relationship becomes almost unrecognizable. It's not just about control over your actions, it's about reshaping your thoughts, beliefs, preferences, and even the way you see yourself until you fit into a mold they've created. It starts subtly. A comment here, a suggestion there. They might say, "You don't really like that, do you?" Or, "That's not really your style." At first, you might brush it off as harmless feedback, but over time, those little remarks start to influence your choices. You change your hair because they said they preferred it another way. You stop wearing certain clothes because they, jokingly, made fun of them. You avoid certain hobbies because they implied they were a waste of time. Slowly, your world becomes smaller, shaped not by your desires, but by their preferences. Then, the erosion moves deeper. They start to challenge your beliefs, not in a way that sparks healthy discussion, but in a way that makes you question your own judgment. If you express an opinion, they might smirk, correct you, or imply you're misinformed. They plant seeds of doubt about your competence, your memory, your instincts. Over time, you begin to second-guess yourself before you even speak. You look to them for confirmation, not just about decisions, but about who you are. This is how identity erosion works. It replaces self-trust with dependency. Instead of making choices because they feel right to you, you start making them to avoid conflict or to earn approval. Instead of seeing yourself through your own eyes, you start seeing yourself through theirs. And if their view of you is critical, controlling, or dismissive, that becomes the version of yourself you start to believe in. In romantic relationships, identity erosion might mean giving up friendships, career goals, or personal values because they clash with your partner's vision of how you should live. In friendships, it can be the friend who subtly mocks your ambitions until you stop pursuing them. In families, it might be a parent who insists they know you better than you know yourself, constantly overriding your decisions until you no longer feel capable of making them. The reason identity erosion is so powerful is that it doesn't feel like an attack. It feels like guidance or support at first. The manipulator positions themselves as someone who's helping you improve, refine, or find your true self. But the self they're guiding you toward is always a version that serves their comfort, their control, or their ego. And by the time you realize what's happening, you've already lost pieces of yourself in ways that are hard to name. The impact runs deep. When your identity is eroded, you lose more than just preferences or habits. You lose the anchor that keeps you steady in life. Without that anchor, it's easy to feel lost, empty, or directionless. Even after leaving the relationship, you may find yourself struggling to answer simple questions like, what do I like? Or what do I believe? Because so much of your life was lived in reaction to someone else's control. It takes time and effort to relearn how to choose for yourself. Reclaiming yourself after identity erosion means getting curious about who you are without their influence. It means revisiting the things you used to love, experimenting with new ones, and paying attention to what you feel, not what they would approve of. It means catching yourself when you hear their voice in your head telling you you're wrong, and replacing it with your own. The truth is, healthy relationships don't chip away at your identity. They protect it. They encourage your individuality, even when it doesn't align perfectly with theirs, and they never make you feel like you have to trade your authenticity for acceptance. Triangulation through praise. Triangulation is one of the most manipulative power plays in toxic relationships, and when it's done through praise, it becomes even more disorienting. Instead of using direct criticism or open competition to create tension, the manipulator uses flattery, but not for you. They praise someone else in front of you, deliberately, strategically, and with just enough weight to make you feel smaller without them ever having to say a single bad word about you. It starts subtly. They might casually mention how amazing someone else is at something you also do. Or they'll highlight another person's qualities, confidence, appearance, skills, in a way that makes it impossible not to compare yourself. On the surface, it looks like harmless admiration, but underneath, it's a psychological chess move designed to put you in a state of quiet competition for their approval. The manipulator knows human beings are wired to seek belonging and recognition, especially from people we care about. When they direct their praise towards someone else while you're watching, they're sending an unspoken message. See this? This is the standard you're being measured against. And because they didn't insult you directly, you can't call them out without looking insecure or jealous, which only strengthens their control. In romantic relationships, triangulation through praise might look like a partner constantly talking about how funny their coworker is, or how driven an ex was, or how attractive a mutual friend is. They'll deliver the praise in a way that sounds innocent, but always within earshot, always with just enough detail to make you question whether you measure up. In friendships, it can be the friend who constantly gushes about another person's loyalty, humor, or success, while making sure you're there to hear it. In workplaces, it's the boss who heaps compliments on another employee in front of you while ignoring your contributions, subtly reminding you that your value is conditional. The brilliance of this tactic lies in its deniability. If you react, they can say, "I was just being nice, Matt," or "You're overthinking it." But the truth is, triangulation through praise isn't about kindness. It's about control. They're keeping you slightly off balance, slightly insecure, so you'll work harder to earn the same admiration they're giving away to someone else. Over time, this tactic can warp your self-image. You start comparing yourself to the person being praised, even when it makes no logical sense. You might push yourself to take on traits you don't actually value, just to match the ideal they seem to admire. You may even find yourself resenting the third person, who is often unaware they're being used as a tool in someone else's manipulation. What makes triangulation through praise so insidious is that it can erode trust in subtle, invisible ways. It can make you feel like you're always auditioning for love, friendship, or respect, that your worth is never quite secure. And when you're in that state, you become easier to control, because the manipulator is the one who decides when and if you get the recognition you crave. The way out starts with recognizing the pattern and refusing to play the comparison game. If someone consistently praises others in ways that make you feel small, it's not about your inadequacy. It's about their need to keep you competing for their attention. Healthy relationships don't pit you against others for affection or approval. They celebrate you directly, without making you feel like you have to fight for your place. The truth is, real praise doesn't need a third person to make its point. It doesn't dangle admiration in front of you like a prize. It looks you in the eye, acknowledges your worth, and never makes you question whether it's yours to keep. Ambient gaslighting. Most people think of gaslighting as something obvious: blatant lies, clear contradictions, or direct denial of your reality. But ambient gaslighting is far more subtle and far more dangerous because it works like background noise. It's not an occasional event, it's an atmosphere, a constant low-level manipulation that makes you slowly doubt your perceptions, your memories, and even your instincts without you realizing it's happening. In ambient gaslighting, there's no dramatic confrontation, no single moment you can point to and say, "That's when they lied to me." Instead, it's an accumulation of small, seemingly harmless moments, dismissive comments, selective forgetting, slightly altered details, or joking remarks that undermine you. Each instance on its own might seem too minor to address, but together they create an emotional fog where you can't tell what's real anymore. The manipulator might forget things you said, even when you know they heard you. They might subtly change parts of a shared story, just enough to make you wonder if you remembered it wrong. They might tell you you're too sensitive whenever you react to something hurtful, making you second-guess whether your feelings are valid. They might act like something you witnessed never happened, or suggest you misunderstood something completely obvious. What makes ambient gaslighting so dangerous is that it doesn't just attack specific memories, it erodes your entire sense-making process. It's like having the foundation of your mind slowly eaten away until you start looking to the manipulator for guidance on what's true. You stop trusting your own eyes, ears, and gut because they've trained you to believe those things can't be relied on. Over time, the effect compounds. You begin to hesitate before speaking up, afraid you'll be told you're wrong again. You might start avoiding confrontation altogether because the fog is easier than the mental exhaustion of constantly defending your own reality. And once you're in that state, the manipulator doesn't need to overtly control you anymore. You've already handed over control by doubting yourself. In relationships, ambient gaslighting can be woven into everyday interactions. A partner might tell you they already mentioned a plan when they didn't, so you feel forgetful. They might insist a conversation went a different way than you remember, so you question your own mind. In workplaces, a boss might misremember deadlines or instructions to shift blame onto you. In families, a parent might subtly rewrite history, downplaying past hurts until you wonder if they were ever that bad. The cruelty of this tactic is how invisible it is to outsiders. If you try to explain it, it can sound petty. "They said I never told them," or "they changed the story a little." People might think you're overreacting. That's part of the trap. The manipulator picks battles so small that you feel ridiculous fighting them, but over time those small battles add up to a war on your own mind. Breaking free from ambient gaslighting requires reclaiming your trust in your own perception. That means documenting events, writing things down and keeping a record of conversations so you have proof for yourself, not to win an argument, but to stay anchored in reality. It means reminding yourself that consistency matters. If your memories and instincts line up repeatedly, they're likely accurate no matter how much someone tries to blur them. Most importantly, it means recognizing that healthy people don't constantly leave you feeling confused about your own reality. They don't chip away at your confidence in what you see, hear, and remember. And they don't hide control behind a constant stream of small, deniable manipulations. The truth is, the strongest form of gaslighting isn't the explosion that leaves you shaken in the moment. It's the quiet, constant hum that makes you stop trusting yourself altogether. Once you silence that hum, you start hearing your own voice again. And that's when you can finally step out of the fog. Subtle boundary erosion. Subtle boundary erosion is the slow, almost invisible process of someone crossing your limits in such small increments that you barely notice it's happening, until one day you realize the boundaries you thought you had no longer exist. It's not the obvious, aggressive kind of boundary violation where someone storms through your defenses. Instead, it's the kind where they take one tiny step over the line at a time, each step so small you feel like it's not worth making a fuss over, but those small steps add up. and by the time you see the damage, the erosion is complete. It usually starts with something that feels harmless. Maybe they ask for a small favor that slightly inconveniences you. Maybe they make a joke at your expense in front of others. But you tell yourself not to take it seriously. Maybe they touch on a topic you've said you're not comfortable with, but you let it slide because you don't want to seem uptight. Each time you ignore that uneasy feeling, you train yourself to tolerate a little more discomfort. And they learn that they can push a little further without consequences. The genius of subtle boundary erosion is that it thrives on your desire to be reasonable. They don't cross a huge, obvious line because they know that would trigger a strong reaction. Instead, they test your boundaries in micro-doses, building a pattern of tiny transgressions. It's the coworker who slowly adds more to your workload without asking. The friend who gradually starts making decisions for you instead of with you. The partner who keeps pushing physical or emotional intimacy beyond your comfort zone, but always just enough to make you question whether it's worth speaking up. Over time, the changes are so gradual that you barely notice your boundaries shifting. You might look back and realize you're doing things you never wanted to do, tolerating behaviors you once considered unacceptable, or feeling drained by situations that used to be non-negotiable for you. And because the erosion happened so quietly, you might even blame yourself, thinking you agreed to all of it, when in reality, you were conditioned to stop defending your space. The manipulator's goal is control, and the erosion is their way of gaining it without setting off alarms. Once they've normalized pushing past your boundaries, they no longer have to ask for more. They simply take it. And because you've been trained to see each step as not a big deal, you might even feel guilty for wanting to pull back. That's when they have you exactly where they want you, giving more than you want to give, staying in situations you don't feel safe in and silencing your own discomfort because you've been conditioned to doubt it. Breaking free from subtle boundary erosion requires two things: awareness and a willingness to enforce limits, even when the violation feels small. You have to start paying attention to the moments that make you feel slightly uneasy, not just the moments that are obviously wrong. That uneasy feeling is your warning signal. And the earlier you act on it, the harder it is for someone to erode your boundaries over time. It also means understanding that it's not rude or overreacting to defend your boundaries. People who respect you will respect your limits, even if they don't understand them right away. People who push against them repeatedly, especially in small, calculated ways, are showing you they value their comfort over your safety. The truth is, healthy relationships don't require you to slowly give up your space, your time, or your values to keep the peace. They don't chip away at your limits in ways that are easy to ignore. They recognize that boundaries aren't walls to be broken down. They're agreements that protect connection, and if someone can only connect with you by dismantling those agreements, it's not connection at all, it's control. Reality distortion field. A reality distortion field isn't just about lying. It's about creating an entire alternate universe where the manipulator's version of events becomes the only one that seems to make sense. It's the slow, strategic reshaping of your perception until you start doubting what's true, ignoring your own instincts and relying on them as the sole source of reality. It's not just deception, it's environmental mind control. The term originally came from the tech world, describing charismatic leaders who could convince people to believe in impossible ideas. But in the context of manipulation, a reality distortion field is far darker. It's when someone uses confidence, repetition, and emotional pressure to bend your understanding of facts, history, and even your own feelings until you can no longer tell where the truth ends and their narrative begins. It starts with subtle shifts. They might clarify details in a way that favors them, casually rewriting parts of the story. They might repeat a false version of events so many times that you begin to wonder if you misremembered. They might frame situations so skillfully that even obvious wrongs start to look justified. Over time, their reality becomes the reality, not because it's true, but because it's the only version you're allowed to believe without conflict. The manipulator uses several tools to maintain this distorted environment. They'll use selective truth, giving you bits of accurate information to make their lies harder to detect. They'll rely on emotional leverage, making you feel guilty or disloyal if you question their version. They'll use social reinforcement, surrounding you with allies or mutual contacts who echo their narrative, creating the illusion of consensus. And they'll employ information control, making sure you have no access to perspectives that might challenge theirs. In relationships, a reality distortion field can make you excuse abuse because the manipulator reframes it as misunderstandings, overreactions, or mutual mistakes. In families, it can make you question your childhood memories because the official story is, "That never happened," or "It wasn't as bad as you think." In workplaces, it can make you doubt obvious exploitation because the culture is built around the idea that this is just how things are done. The psychological cost is enormous. Living inside a distorted reality forces you to abandon the one tool that keeps you grounded. Trust in your own perception. You start censoring your thoughts, afraid that your version of events might be wrong. You find yourself defending the manipulator's narrative to others, even when part of you knows it doesn't feel right. And because you're cut off from outside confirmation, the distortion deepens until the idea of trusting yourself feels dangerous. The most dangerous part is that reality distortion fields don't just control your present, they rewrite your past. By altering your memory of what happened, they also alter how you see yourself. You might start to believe you were the one at fault in situations where you were actually the victim. You might reinterpret moments of clarity as moments of confusion. The manipulator doesn't just control the now. They own the story you tell yourself about who you are. Breaking free requires re-establishing an independent point of reference. That might mean seeking outside perspectives from people you trust, documenting events so you have your own record, and creating mental space away from the manipulator's constant influence. It means practicing saying, "That's not how I remember it," without immediately apologizing for disagreeing. Most importantly, it means recognizing that healthy people don't require you to abandon your perception in favor of theirs. They can hold different views without making yours invalid. They don't build a bubble where only their truth survives. The truth is, a reality distortion field can feel unshakable when you're inside it. But once you step outside and breathe in the air of your own clarity again, you realize the walls were never solid. They were built out of words, repetition, and fear. And words can be rewritten. Evasive compliance. Evasive compliance is one of the most deceptive manipulation tactics because it hides resistance behind the mask of cooperation. On the surface, it looks like agreement, a yes to your request, a nod to your boundaries, a promise to follow through. But beneath that appearance, the manipulator is finding quiet, indirect ways to avoid actually doing what they agreed to. They say all the right words, but their actions are empty, delayed, or so half-hearted that the end result is the same as refusal. The power of evasive compliance is that it's hard to call out without sounding unreasonable. After all, they technically agreed. They didn't openly defy you, they didn't argue, they didn't refuse outright. If you confront them, they'll act confused or offended. "I said I'd do it, didn't I? Why are you so upset?" They frame themselves as cooperative, while subtly ensuring the outcome never matches the commitment. It often starts with small, low-stakes situations. You ask for help with something minor and they agree, but don't follow through until you've had to remind them multiple times. They promise to respect a boundary, but conveniently forget at the exact moments it matters. They accept your conditions for something, but then drag their feet so long that you give up or do it yourself. This repeated pattern trains you to lower your expectations, because chasing them for follow-through feels more exhausting than just letting it go. Evasive compliance thrives in relationships where direct confrontation is uncomfortable. The manipulator counts on your desire to keep the peace, to avoid conflict over small things. Over time, these small acts of passive resistance accumulate into a larger dynamic where your needs are acknowledged in words but ignored in reality. You're left with the illusion of agreement, but not the substance of it. In workplaces, evasive compliance might look like an employee who nods during a meeting, but quietly ignores the assigned tasks, or a boss who approves your request but never actually processes it. In friendships, it's the person who says, "Of course I'll be there," but always cancels at the last minute. In romantic relationships, It can be a partner who promises to change a hurtful behavior, but only modifies it in ways that make no real difference. The brilliance and cruelty of this tactic is that it shifts the emotional burden onto you. When the manipulator fails to follow through, you're the one stuck deciding whether to push the issue and risk being seen as controlling, or to let it slide and quietly resent them. Over time, many victims choose the second option, slowly accepting that their boundaries and needs will be met in name only. Breaking free from evasive compliance means learning to measure people by their consistent actions, not their agreeable words. It means setting clear timelines, following up without apology, and being willing to address patterns even when they seem small. And it means recognizing that cooperation without follow-through is not cooperation at all. It's a performance designed to pacify you while protecting their own comfort. Healthy people follow through because they respect your time, energy, and boundaries. They don't need to pretend agreement to avoid honest discussion, and they certainly don't rely on passive sabotage to maintain control. The truth is, evasive compliance is just refusal in disguise, a quiet rebellion dressed as cooperation, and once you see the disguise for what it is, you stop mistaking polite words for real respect. Moral credentialing. Moral credentialing is one of the most subtle yet dangerous manipulation tactics because it hides self-interest and wrongdoing under the disguise of virtue. It's when someone uses their good deeds, moral beliefs, or past acts of kindness as a free pass to behave in ways that would otherwise be unacceptable, as if their earlier goodness has earned them an unlimited license to harm without consequence. At its core, moral credentialing works like this: because I've proven I'm a good person, anything I do now can't possibly be bad. The manipulator leans on their history of virtue as a shield. They'll remind you of the times they supported you, defended you, or acted in your best interest. They'll point to their charitable acts, their moral stance, their identity as one of the good ones, and when they do something hurtful, selfish, or unethical, they expect you, and everyone else, to give them the benefit of the doubt, no matter how obvious the harm. This tactic often starts long before the harm happens. In the early stages of a relationship, the manipulator will make sure you see their good side, their generosity, their empathy, their fairness. They want you to build a mental record of their moral credentials, because later they'll use that record to dismiss your objections. When you call out a harmful behavior, they'll say things like, "After everything I've done for you, you know I'm not that kind of person. Remember how I stood by you when no one else did?" By invoking their past goodness, they shift the focus away from the harm in the present. The problem isn't their action. The problem, they suggest, is your ingratitude, your overreaction, your failure to appreciate their moral track record. Moral credentialing is powerful because it plays on guilt and loyalty. Most people don't want to believe that someone who's been good to them in the past could also harm them now. So instead of holding the manipulator accountable, they question themselves. Am I being unfair? Am I forgetting all the good they've done? This hesitation gives the manipulator space to keep doing what they're doing, all while maintaining their image as a good person. In workplaces, moral credentialing might be the boss who prides themselves on promoting diversity, then uses that reputation to dismiss any accusations of favoritism or discrimination. In friendships, it can be the friend who constantly reminds you how they always have your back, while regularly undermining you in subtle ways. In romantic relationships, it can be the partner who says, "I've done more for you than anyone else ever has," as a way to excuse betrayal, neglect, or control. The most insidious part of moral credentialing is how it manipulates not just your perception of the person, but your perception of morality itself. It blurs the line between past and present, making you feel as if someone's past kindness obligates you to ignore their current harm. It's the emotional equivalent of saying, "I've earned the right to hurt you because I've helped you before." Breaking free from moral credentialing means separating someone's history from their current behavior. Yes, a person can have done good things for you and still be responsible for the harm they cause now. Past kindness does not cancel out present cruelty. True moral integrity isn't about stacking up good deeds to cash in later. It's about acting consistently in alignment with values, even when it's inconvenient. The truth is, good people don't use their morality as a bargaining chip or a get-out-of-accountability card. They don't leverage their past kindness to silence you. And they certainly don't believe that one chapter of goodness entitles them to write the rest of the story however they please. Empathy mimicry. Empathy mimicry is one of the most deceptive forms of manipulation because it's not about having empathy, it's about performing it. The manipulator doesn't genuinely feel or connect with your emotions, but they've learned how to convincingly imitate the signs of compassion, concern, and understanding. It's emotional camouflage. The danger is that empathy mimicry can look almost identical to the real thing. They know the right words to say, the right tone to use, the right body language to display. They nod in the right moments, sigh in sympathy, mirror your expressions, all while calculating their next move. This isn't emotional connection. It's strategic acting designed to gain your trust, lower your guard, and keep you invested in them. The manipulator studies you. They watch how you express pain, how you respond to comfort, what phrases or gestures make you feel understood. Then they feed those cues back to you, not because they care about your well-being, but because it serves their goals. Whether that's getting information from you, securing your loyalty, or avoiding accountability for something they've done. In relationships, empathy mimicry might show up when they suddenly become warm and attentive, only after you've pulled away or set boundaries. In friendships, it can be the friend who offers sympathy when you're struggling, but later uses those same vulnerabilities against you. In workplaces, it's the boss or colleague who listens patiently to your frustrations but never actually takes action to help, because the point wasn't to help, it was to manage your perception of them. What makes empathy mimicry so insidious is that it can create a deep emotional dependency. You believe you've found someone who really gets you, and you may even open up more than you normally would. That vulnerability gives them leverage, and because their performance is so convincing, you may ignore warning signs like how their supposed empathy disappears the moment your needs conflict with their interests, or how their comfort always seems to steer the focus back to them. Over time, you may start to feel a strange disconnect, as if their words and actions don't fully align, even though they're saying all the right things. That's because genuine empathy shows up in consistent behavior, not just in carefully timed displays. Real empathy doesn't vanish when it's inconvenient, and it certainly doesn't turn your pain into a tool for someone else's gain. Breaking free from empathy mimicry means paying attention to the pattern, not just the performance. Does their concern lead to meaningful change? Do they respect your feelings even when it doesn't benefit them? Or does their empathy appear mostly when they need to maintain control, rebuild your trust, or keep you from walking away? The truth is, empathy isn't proven in how well someone can act like they care in the moment. It's proven in how they show up for you consistently without needing an audience, a reward, or an advantage. Anything else is just a mask. Pseudo-authenticity. Pseudo-authenticity is one of the most misleading forms of manipulation because it weaponizes the very thing that's supposed to make relationships genuine: openness. It's when someone gives you just enough vulnerability, honesty, or raw emotion to make you believe you're seeing the real them, when in reality, it's a carefully curated performance designed to manipulate your perception. At first, it feels genuine. They might share a personal struggle, an embarrassing story, or a deep emotional confession. You see their tears, hear the crack in their voice, feel the weight of their words. And in that moment, you believe you're connecting with someone on a deeply human level. That belief disarms you. It makes you more likely to trust them, to give them the benefit of the doubt, to overlook flaws because they've been through so much. But pseudo-authenticity is selective. They choose which truths to share and when to share them. The details they give you are often crafted to elicit a specific reaction: sympathy, loyalty, forgiveness. They might confess to small mistakes in order to distract you from bigger ones. They might reveal struggles that make them seem relatable, while hiding patterns that would change your entire view of them. And they almost always reveal these truths at strategic moments, when they need to rebuild trust, soften criticism, or deepen your emotional investment in them. This is not vulnerability for the sake of connection. It's vulnerability for the sake of control. The manipulator knows that most people associate openness with honesty, so by giving you glimpses of their authentic self, they can make you believe you've been given access to their whole truth. That belief makes you less likely to question them, because who questions someone who's being so real? In romantic relationships, pseudo-authenticity might be a partner suddenly opening up about their painful past right after you've confronted them about hurtful behavior, shifting the focus from their actions to their wounds. In friendships, it can be the friend who dramatically shares personal hardships only when they sense you pulling away, ensuring you stay emotionally anchored to them. In workplaces, it's the leader who shares a carefully constructed, humble story to seem relatable, while hiding the more self-serving decisions they make behind the scenes. Over time, pseudo-authenticity can blur your ability to distinguish between sincerity and strategy. You might start to equate emotional display with truth, even when the facts don't fully align. You might excuse harmful actions because you know their heart, and you might give them more access to you than they've ever truly earned, because you believe they've already given you the same in return. The way to see through pseudo-authenticity is to look beyond the performance and into the pattern. Does their openness come with consistency, or only when it benefits them? Does their vulnerability lead to genuine change, or is it simply used as a reset button to avoid accountability? Are the truths they share balanced by truths they avoid, especially ones that would put them in a less flattering light? True authenticity isn't selective in a way that manipulates trust. It doesn't show up only when someone needs to keep you close. It's steady, unforced, and doesn't need to be weaponized. And most importantly, it aligns with action, because without that alignment, authenticity is nothing more than a very convincing lie. Inverted narcissism. Inverted narcissism is one of the most deceptive personality patterns because it hides in the shadows, wearing the mask of humility, devotion, and self-sacrifice. On the surface, the inverted narcissist appears to be the opposite of the loud, self-promoting, arrogant narcissist we're used to spotting. They don't dominate conversations with stories about their greatness. They don't demand to be the center of attention, at least not in obvious ways. Instead, they quietly position themselves as the misunderstood, the overlooked, the endlessly giving or the long-suffering victim. But at the core, their emotional engine runs on the same fuel as the grandiose narcissist, the need for validation, control, and emotional dependence from others. This form of narcissism thrives in emotional subtleties. The inverted narcissist gains influence not by dazzling people with achievements or charisma, but by making themselves indispensable. They will listen for hours to your problems, go out of their way to help you, show up when others don't, and at first, this makes you feel deeply valued and safe. But there is an unspoken exchange happening. Their selflessness is not unconditional, it's an emotional contract, and the terms are simple. I give you this much, so you owe me loyalty, admiration, and unwavering emotional support in return. This is not generosity for generosity's sake. It's emotional investment with an expected payoff. And when that payoff doesn't come, the mask starts to slip. They may not explode in rage like an overt narcissist, but they will withdraw warmth, deliver guilt-laced remarks, or remind you, subtly or directly, of everything they've done for you. The narrative becomes one of injustice. They give so much, yet get so little in return. The inverted narcissist's victimhood is one of their sharpest tools. They carry stories of being misunderstood, mistreated, or unappreciated for years, sometimes decades. These stories serve a dual purpose. They invite sympathy, and they create an emotional frame in which anyone who fails to meet their needs becomes just like everyone else who hurt them. This dynamic keeps you on edge, constantly trying to prove that you are different, that you won't abandon them, that you won't be ungrateful. Unlike overt narcissists, who are easy to identify because of their obvious self-centeredness, inverted narcissists can live undetected in close relationships for years. Their need for control is cloaked in service. Their hunger for validation is wrapped in apparent humility. They may even openly criticize overt narcissists, positioning themselves as the good kind of person, the safe alternative. And yet, if you look closely, Their relationships often revolve around them, their needs, their emotional state, their sense of being wronged or unappreciated. In romantic relationships, they might overextend themselves for their partner in ways that seem selfless, but are actually a form of silent bargaining. I will give you more than anyone else has ever given you, but in return, you must love me exactly the way I want, for as long as I want. In friendships, they might be the one who's always there for you, but expect you to prioritize their emotional crises over your own life. In workplaces, they may be the reliable, undercredited worker who quietly resents everyone else while collecting mental evidence of how much more they contribute than others. The emotional trap of inverted narcissism is that they make you feel indebted for things you never asked them to do, and because their giving often looks so pure, you feel guilty questioning their motives. This guilt becomes a leash, keeping you tethered even when you start to notice the relationship feels one-sided or draining. Breaking free from the influence of an inverted narcissist requires peeling back the layers of their selflessness and asking hard questions. Is their generosity consistent, or is it given mainly when it serves their image? Does their victimhood ever lead to self-reflection, or is it always used as proof of their moral superiority? Do they respect your boundaries, or do they interpret limits as ingratitude? True humility doesn't require others to pay an emotional debt. Genuine kindness doesn't keep a mental scorecard. And real victimhood doesn't become a permanent identity used to command loyalty and control. The truth is, inverted narcissism isn't the opposite of narcissism. It's narcissism turned inside out. The spotlight isn't gone. It's simply redirected. Instead of shining on their accomplishments, it shines on their sacrifices, their suffering, their quiet devotion. But make no mistake, the center of the story is still them. And the moment you stop playing your role in their narrative, you'll see how quickly that quiet, selfless love can turn into cold withdrawal or subtle punishment. Emotional breadcrumbing. Emotional breadcrumbing is the art of giving someone just enough affection, attention, or validation to keep them hooked, without ever offering real commitment, consistency, or emotional depth. It's not an outright rejection, but it's nowhere near a true investment. Instead, it's a calculated drip feed of hope, designed to keep you chasing more while the other person remains in full control of the relationship's pace and depth. The manipulator knows exactly when to drop a breadcrumb, a kind message after days of silence, a sudden display of affection right when you're pulling away, a promise of a future together without any follow-through. These small doses of connection aren't random. They're timed to reignite your emotional attachment, just enough to keep you from walking away completely. What makes emotional breadcrumbing so powerful is that it plays directly into the human need for closure and consistency. When you care about someone, your brain naturally seeks patterns and stability. Breadcrumbing scrambles that instinct by mixing warmth with coldness, clarity with confusion. You're left constantly trying to decode their intentions, wondering if the latest gesture means things are finally moving forward. In romantic relationships, breadcrumbing can look like someone who keeps you emotionally on the hook with late-night calls, deep conversations, or affectionate messages, but always has an excuse for why they can't commit. In friendships, it might be the friend who disappears until they need something, then floods you with attention. In workplaces, it's the boss who dangles vague promises of promotion or recognition to keep you working harder without delivering on them. Over time, breadcrumbing conditions you to settle for the smallest signs of care or validation. You start valuing crumbs as if they were a feast. You justify the inconsistency because of the moments that feel real, not realizing that those moments are strategically placed to keep you from noticing the emptiness in between. The emotional toll is heavy. Breadcrumbing keeps you in a state of low-level anxiety, always waiting for the next signal, the next message, the next maybe. It trains you to doubt your worth, making you believe you should be grateful for whatever scraps of connection you're given. And because it's not outright rejection, you cling to the possibility that things could change, even though the manipulator has no intention of giving you more. Breaking free from breadcrumbing requires shifting your focus from what they occasionally give to what they consistently provide. A healthy relationship, whether romantic, platonic, or professional, doesn't keep you waiting and wondering. It offers reliability, follow-through, and mutual investment. Crumbs are not a meal, and intermittent attention is not love. The truth is, emotional breadcrumbing isn't about keeping the relationship alive. It's about keeping you in place. Once you stop chasing crumbs, you open yourself to finding the full connection you actually deserve. Context manipulation. Context manipulation is the strategic control of how information is presented so that the meaning and your interpretation changes entirely. It's not just about lying, it's about taking selective truths, reframing events, or withholding key details, so that what you see is no longer the full picture. The manipulator doesn't have to alter the facts themselves. They simply alter the frame around those facts, and suddenly the entire story shifts in their favor. This tactic is powerful because humans rarely view information in isolation. We rely on context to decide what's acceptable, what's fair, and what's real. Change the context, and you can change the judgment. A cruel statement can be spun as just a joke if delivered with a smile. A broken promise can be reframed as circumstances beyond my control. A betrayal can be recast as doing what was necessary for the greater good. Context manipulation works best when the manipulator controls not just what you hear, but also when and how you hear it. They might give you bad news when you're already overwhelmed, so you're less likely to challenge it. They might reveal information in pieces, ensuring that you never have the full puzzle at once, or they might flood you with irrelevant details, distracting you from the parts that actually matter. In relationships, context manipulation might look like a partner retelling arguments in a way that erases their part in the conflict, making you seem like the aggressor. In workplaces, it might be a boss who gives higher management a sanitized version of events, painting themselves as the hero while omitting the damage they caused. In friendships, it might be the friend who leaves out the parts of a story that would make you question their motives, making their actions seem entirely reasonable when they weren't. The danger is that once you accept the manipulated context, you're more likely to side with the manipulator, even against your own experiences. You might start defending them to others, repeating their version of events without realizing you're spreading a carefully edited narrative. This erodes your ability to trust your own memory and instincts because you begin to rely on their framing instead of your direct perception. Breaking free from context manipulation requires developing the habit of asking, "What am I not being told?" It means looking for missing details, seeking out alternate perspectives, and resisting the urge to draw quick conclusions based on a single version of events. It also means paying attention to patterns. Does this person consistently present information in a way that benefits them, especially when their actions are under scrutiny? Healthy communication doesn't require hiding facts or shifting the frame to protect one's image. It allows for full transparency, even when the truth is uncomfortable. Anyone who repeatedly controls context to shape your perception isn't protecting you. They're protecting themselves, often at your expense. The truth is, a story can be factually accurate and still be fundamentally dishonest if the frame around it is manipulated. And once you learn to look past the frame, you start seeing the whole picture, not just the one they want you to believe. Blameshifting amnesia. Blameshifting amnesia is one of the most exhausting and destabilizing manipulation tactics because it merges two forms of psychological warfare, selective memory loss and strategic blame transfer, into a single move that leaves you questioning not just what happened, but whether you can trust your own mind at all. It's not simply that the manipulator says, "I don't remember." It's that they weaponize that supposed lapse in memory as a way to dodge accountability and then pivot to making you the problem. The first layer of this tactic is the denial of memory. They insist that the hurtful comment you're recalling, the promise they broke, or the event you describe simply doesn't exist in their mind. They may look shocked, confused, even wounded that you would bring it up. This initial denial is designed to throw you off balance. Instead of focusing on their behavior, you suddenly find yourself defending your memory. The second layer is the blame transfer. If they can't remember it, then maybe you're wrong, exaggerating, or twisting events. And if, hypothetically, it did happen, they frame it as something you caused. They'll say things like, "I honestly don't recall that at all. You must be remembering it wrong." That doesn't sound like me. Are you sure you didn't misunderstand? If I did say that, it was probably because you pushed me too far. Notice how every statement moves the responsibility away from them and onto you. The conversation is no longer about their action, it's about your supposed overreaction, faulty perception, or role in provoking them. Over time, this cycle wears you down. You start second-guessing your own recall, wondering if you really are overreacting. You hesitate before bringing up issues because you anticipate the same exhausting process. They deny, you defend, they twist, you retreat. The result is silence, compliance, and a gradual erosion of your self-trust. In intimate relationships, blame-shifting amnesia can leave you feeling like you're living with two versions of reality. Yours, where the harm clearly happened, and theirs, where it didn't, or where you caused it. This split reality is a breeding ground for self-doubt and emotional dependency. In workplaces, it can be the colleague who forgets key decisions they made and then subtly implies that you must have misunderstood, leaving you to take the fall for mistakes. In families, it can be the parent who claims they don't remember ever saying something deeply hurtful from your childhood, then criticizes you for holding on to the past instead of letting it go. What makes this tactic especially cruel is that it exploits the fallibility of human memory. Memory is imperfect, and the manipulator uses that truth against you. They know that most people are open to the possibility they could be wrong, and they weaponize that humility, twisting it into an opening to reframe themselves as the innocent party, and you as the one creating unnecessary drama. The psychological damage goes far beyond the incident itself. Blame-shifting amnesia undermines one of the core anchors of your mental stability, your ability to trust your own perception of events. When that anchor is weakened, you become more reliant on their version of reality, which gives them even greater control over you. Breaking free from blame-shifting amnesia requires a two-part approach. First, you have to protect your reality from being rewritten. This might mean documenting incidents when they happen, keeping records of conversations, or confiding in a trusted third party who can help you stay grounded. Not so you can win arguments, but so you have a private, objective reference point when doubt creeps in. Second, you have to step out of their conversational trap. When they say, "I don't remember," don't get stuck in proving they did. Instead, bring the focus back to the present impact. Whether you remember or not, this is how it affected me, and it still needs to be addressed. This keeps the conversation anchored in accountability instead of spiraling into a debate about memory. The truth is, genuine forgetfulness doesn't come with defensive hostility, selective timing, and convenient blame shifting. It doesn't only happen when the memory in question makes someone look bad. When amnesia appears only in moments where accountability is required, it's not a lapse, it's a tactic. And once you recognize it as such, you stop treating it like a misunderstanding and start treating it like the manipulation it really is.